Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to have a look at a collaboration beer today. This one is a three-way collaboration and all three of the breweries involved in this one have featured on the channel a good few times before. I've had some really nice beers from all of them, so I have to say I'm very curious to see what happens when they put their heads together. So yeah, let's go for it then. So for this review, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review, for the home brewery, we are going to return to OO Brewing. So this beer is called Business as Usual. It comes in at 7% ABV and is another New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. But it's brewed in collaboration with Stigbergets Bryggeri, who are of course also very well known in this style, and then also In Brewing, who are one of the numerous gypsy breweries operating in the Gothenburg area, potentially the best known gypsy brewery operating up in Gothenburg. But yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for May of 2021, and when I saw that all three of these breweries were involved in this one, I had to have a go at it. When I first saw the name, I actually thought it was going to be a Spike Brewery beer, because they're the ones who usually have the beers with business in the name, but I was a bit surprised when I saw this was a three-way collaboration with OO, Stigbergets and All In. So fingers crossed it's another good beer. Knowing these breweries, it probably will be, and hopefully you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So yeah, curious to see how it turns out, and let's get on with it. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done from OO, Stigbergets and All In Brewing. You will no doubt see more added to all three of those lists at some point in the near future, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about OO Brewing then, onto my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you already, OO Brewing are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded back in 2011 by Olaf and Ole Andersson, who are childhood friends, and for many years these guys were also avid home brewers. But the pair have been very interested in beer since a young age, and Ole was apparently heavily involved in the craft beer scene since pre-drinking age, and he was the original head brewer at Stigbergets Bryggeri, and this is where the OO Brewing beers were originally produced. But while Ole takes care of the brewing side of things, Olaf manages the business side of the brewery, and apparently they just like to make beers that they would want to drink themselves. But in April of 2017, Ole left Stigbergets Bryggeri and invested his time fully in OO, with the company investing in a new facility in Hisingen near the Tingstedt Bridge. And this is equipped with a 2,000 litre system, and this means they can brew up to 500,000 litres of beer per year. But in the first year, they produced around 100,000 litres, and they're basically planning to expand it up to that capacity over the next few years. And in 2019, they apparently brewed around 300,000 litres. I wasn't able to find a figure for 2020 of course, but I think they might have expanded it beyond that. But as of May 2021, when I'm filming this particular review for you, these guys have produced around 80 different kinds of beers, and they are known mainly for their New England hazy IPAs, but they've got some other very good styles of beer as well. I've had quite a few different things from them. The Ectopils is also a good one. You know, their Baltic Porter is also really nice as well. The anniversary porter that they do is always good. So yeah, if you find some beers from OO Brewing, you will certainly enjoy those. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about OO Brewing for the moment. A very well respected brewery here in Sweden, and Ole Andersson of course is a little bit of a legend amongst the craft beer brewing community, particularly so if you're interested in the New England hazy IPAs. But yeah, if you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, on to the next brewery then, on to Stigbergets Bryggeri. So Stigbergets, as I mentioned to you earlier as well, are also based in Gothenburg, and this company was founded by Niels Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson. So these guys own two two bars that share the one kitchen. This is the Bar Kino and the Hagabion's Cafe, which can be found on Linagatan in the city, and they both opened back in around 2007. And this building is actually an independent cinema. If you want a closer look at it, you can go and have a little look at my Out and About video. I filmed that in October of 2019, if I remember correctly, and it's a really, really interesting place. So I hope that I can get back there at some point and actually watch a film. But yeah, originally the idea that these guys had was to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars, and this led to them kegging the beer and selling it to other pubs, and eventually to bottling it, which began in November of 2014. But the original beers that they produced were mainly English and German styles, but of course they really started to make their name when they focused on the more hoppy American styles of beer. As I kind of mentioned earlier in the OO section, the original head brewer was Ole Anderson, who is the co-owner of OO. And he stayed with them until April of 2017, at which point he was replaced for a short period by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the vice presidents at Three Floyds over in Munster in Indiana, close to Chicago. But they moved to a brewery just after this at Partihalarna, where they were brewing 5,000 litre batches at a time, and they also began working on some sour beers there as well. I still need to try one of the Stigbergets sours, actually. I've not really had a go at any of those yet. But they started selling their beers then in 440ml cans as well, and this allowed them to export their beer a lot more widely. And these days they have a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown in London, and also Lucas Munraid, who used to work for All In Brewing. So yeah, it's an interesting collaboration with this one, actually, with all of these brewers kind of mixing in. But they've just moved to a new brewery in Ringen as of summer 2020, and they're apparently considering brewing some lambic beer here as well. And they're saying that there's the possibility for a bar and swimming facilities. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops for Stigbergets, actually, and hopefully we can get up there at some point and take a look at it. But I'd love to interview the guys from Stigbergets. That would be interesting. And Ole Anderson, of course, would be a really interesting interview for a Meet the Brewery segment as well. But yeah, they opened up a bar in Stockholm in April of 2020 as well, and they opened up their own folköl shop in Gothenburg as well. So for those of you watching outside of Sweden, folköl is beer that is 3.5% and below. That means it can be sold in the supermarkets. But yeah, as of May 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, Stigbergets Bryggeri have produced around 110 different kinds of beers, and as I mentioned, they are mostly known for their New England hazy IPAs. Probably the most famous ones would be the Amazing Haze and the GBG Beer Week beer for 2016, which came back as the new and improved GBG Beer Week, and those were both developed, of course, by Ole Anderson. And of course, the Narangi, the OO do, that's one of the other kind of cult classic Swedish New England IPAs. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Stigbergets Bryggeri for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, again, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages. Let's go on to our last brewery then and round off the history section of the video. So, All In Brewing, as I mentioned to you earlier, also based in Gothenburg, and these guys are a gypsy brewery, and they began operations in 2012 under Pelle Frost. But they have plans to invest in their own brewery at some point in the future, but right now they are still operating as a gypsy brewery. In their early years, they travelled Europe making collaboration beers with quite a few other different breweries, but recently they've been brewing most of their beers in Sweden. They started brewing with Brewski in Helsingborg, and one of their brewers, Lucas Munraid, who we mentioned earlier, when he was still with them, he was working full-time at Brewski, brewing both the All In and the Brewski beers, and later they also brewed their beers for a while at West Coast Brewery. But at one point they did have three brewers. There was Lucas, Victor and Andreas, and they've always been into the big kind of fruity American IPAs, but they also like their imperial stouts as well. So Victor and Andreas are the original brewers for All In Brewing, whereas Lucas was headhunted from another brewery, and he was the official head brewer, but they worked as a team to develop and create all these different recipes. But in 2015 they were voted one of the top 100 brewers in the world by Rate Beer, which is pretty interesting considering, you know, they were a gypsy brewery and they're a Swedish brewery. Rate Beer is very American dominated, of course, but in 2019 they were aiming to scale up their brewing to around 100,000 litres, and Pelle was making efforts to get the beers exported across to Europe. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, Lucas Munraid now works for Stigbergets Bryggeri. So I think Pelle is actually taking more of an active role in the brewing side of things, along with Victor and Andreas. But every year All In host their own beer festival in Gothenburg, which is called the All In Fest, and some of the All In guys also have two bars in Gothenburg together with Dugis Bryggeri and Electric Nurse, and these are the brewers' beer bars. So if you go and check out the one on Tredje Långgatan, that is the original one, and the other one is very nice as well. I still need to film a video there actually, but I did manage to pop in there when I was in Gothenburg last time, and it was quite interesting. But I think I always like going to the original places, so yeah, I filmed in the original one. But as of May 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, All In have produced around 65 different kinds of beer, and that will no doubt increase over the next few months and years and things. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about All In Brewing. Again, if you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that is it for your history section. A bit of a longer one this time because of course there's 3 breweries involved here, but like we said, this beer is a little bit of a Gothenburg special. So yeah, let's get cracking and have a look at the beer itself then. So as you can see, artwork on this one is a little bit different compared to what you would normally find. This is also a half-litre can as well, and I'm not sure why this one is a 500 milliliter can rather than a standard Swedish 440. I really don't know, but the beer itself was actually brewed at OO Brewing in Hisingen, like we say. So this is brewed at OO Brewing, but I did actually find a version of this beer on Untappd where I think it must have been brewed at Stigbergets, because the Stigbergets name was the one that was in the centre of the can. So yeah, as I say, half-litre can. This one, I think this beer cost me about 50 Swedish kronor, maybe a little bit more than that. Let's say it cost me 55 Swedish kronor. That's kind of standard if you like. But yeah, 55 Swedish kronor, that would work out about €5.50, £5 sterling, and maybe $6.50 American. So for a half-litre of a New England Hazy IPA, that's not bad. That is actually not bad at all. But yeah, this one, as I say, was released in May 2021 as part of the Local Småskaligt. So let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this one has in store for us. So yeah, 2 breweries who are of course very, very well known for their New England Hazy IPAs. So yeah, I'm just going to check what's in the malt base of this one. This one apparently just contains wheat malt, so yeah, maybe we don't even consider it a New England Hazy actually. It might just be a kind of regular IPA. So yeah, let me just line up the can again, and there we go. So we've got maybe about 2/3 of it in the glass, something like that, or maybe 3/4, whatever. But yeah, it looks very, very nice. So as you can see, this one's poured with about a 1/4 finger of a frothy, I would say, perfect white head. That is fading away though quite quickly to be a very kind of thin foamy layer, and there's a nice kind of foamy ring around the edge of the glass there, which looks great. But yeah, there's 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it looks, it does look pretty nice. I mean, this is kind of what you would expect from a New England IPA, or any kind of IPA, to be honest with you. So yeah, this one actually does look a little bit more. It actually looks as if it could well be more of a West Coaster or something. But you know, probably knowing what goes on with IPAs these days, it potentially is more of a, it potentially is actually more of a kind of hybrid or something like this. But you can see it does have a little bit more of a kind of natural haze vibe to it, but if I put my fingers behind it, there is still a good little bit of that in there. But yeah, it certainly looks clearer than some of the other beers you're going to get from Stigbergets or OO. And come to think of it, I don't think I've actually had an IPA yet from All In Brewing. I think most of the beers I've reviewed from these guys have been Imperial Stouts, although I have had a few collaboration IPAs involving All In Brewing, of course. But yeah, certainly looks interesting, I have to say, this one. So yeah, remember, in terms of the colour of these beers, this one I would say is a lovely kind of bright mangoey yellow colour. The colour of the beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil. Adjuncts and barrel aging, of course, can play a role, but not in these kind of IPAs. But the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer, but it is determined in the first instance by the type of malts that you use. The level of haze in these beers, of course, depends on the oat and the wheat content and the yeast to some degree as well. But yeah, that will vary from brewery to brewery, of course. But yeah, in terms of a modern IPA, nothing overly surprising about this one. But I was expecting something a little bit more hazy when you consider that Stigbergets and OO are involved in this. But nothing wrong with that. So let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one then, and just see how we get on. But I have to say, I do have high hopes for this one considering the breweries involved. But yeah, let's go for it. yeah, it actually smells very, very straight shooting in a lot of ways. So yeah, yeah, it just comes across like really as a straight shooting IPA, this one. You don't quite get the creaminess out of this that you'll get out of some of the other Stigbergets and OO beers, but you know, as I say, it's not got the oats in it according to the ingredients list. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. But you do get a nice little bit of a, you can smell like a sort of quite crisp and fresh white bready base to this one. There's a little bit of a bread crusty quality in there, absolutely. And yeah, you can definitely get a little bit of the wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose. So a lot of interesting things going on with this beer for sure. It's quite, as I say, just a straight shooting, no frills IPA if you like. So yeah, wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose, a lovely soft white bready character forming the backbone of the beer, some nice bread crusty elements as well, and then you know, you do get a little touch of a sort of brown sugary element out of this one. There's a wee bit of that kind of Werther's original kind of butter candy type quality, and also a wee bit of a McVitie's kind of digestive sort of thing in there. So there could perhaps be a little bit of a biscuit malt or a pilsner malt or something in this, because the beer actually does have just a wee bit, it actually does have just a little bit of crispness, and you can kind of smell that on the nose. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a wee bit of a kind of pilsner or a kind of lagery malt in this one to give you a bit more crispness, and that would kind of suit the beer when it's not got the oats in it and it's a little bit more, it might be a bit more kind of West Coasty leaning actually. But yeah, malt base in this one, quite clean and quite crisp overall. But yeah, soft white bread in there, a bit of bread crust, a little bit of Werther's original, wee bit of biscuit, and a sort of wheaty bitiness to it. So I like it. I do like it in that sense. On the hoppy side of things, it's got a lovely big green component to it, this one. There's a wee touch of earthiness. There's just a little touch of earthiness in behind it, which I certainly enjoy. So yeah, lovely little touch of earthiness in behind it there. You've got some really nice, you've got a lovely big kind of floral aromatic-y sort of thing there, which is great. I wouldn't describe it as overly spicy, but it comes across as quite a nice and deep floral aromaticity that you get out of this one. And you're also getting, you know, just a little bit of a kind of grassy, zesty element out of the beer as well. So yeah, it smells quite fresh and quite crisp at the same time. So yeah, the overall vibe of this beer is quite nice, very fresh, a little bit zesty, and the green component is nice and big actually. So it's a very inviting beer overall, this one, but again, it's quite straight shooting. Fruity side of things, you know, there's something a bit familiar about this. It comes across as more kind of tropical leaning. I don't get so much in the way of kind of orangey character out of this, but at the same time it's a little bit hard to place exactly what you know, what hop could be in this one. Could it just be a Simcoe IPA, or maybe a little bit of Simcoe and Centennial or something, because it does have a wee bit more of a kind of citrusy sort of edge to it. But yeah, so for me, you do get a tiny little hint of a slightly more pungent passion fruit or something. There's a wee bit of a soft mango in there, a little bit of apricot. Other than that, nothing overly complex, if you like. So yeah, that's a really interesting point to make about this beer, like I said. So yeah, the fruits are kind of, again, very straight shooting. Bit of passion fruit, lovely juicy mango, a little bit of apricot, and then you've got a wee touch of a you do have a nice wee touch of a kind of sort of limey note underneath it. So yeah, I'd be curious to know what hop would be in this one. Could it be a little bit of a Simcoe and a Motueka or something like that, or could it be a little bit like Simcoe and Centennial? But I think Centennial would give you a little bit more zip than this actually. But there is something very familiar about this. I think whatever mix of hops is in here, I think I've had it before, but it comes across as very soft, and it's not quite complex enough, I think, to be Citra, come to think of it. So yeah, or it could be Citra on its own. That would make sense, but then I would have thought Citra would have a little bit more of a kind of pungent grapefruity type element to it. So yeah, food for thought with this one. I don't know, I always used to like playing Guess the Hops with these beers, but it gets increasingly difficult the further we go into this whole beer reviewing journey because there's so many more hops. But yeah, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck in. Quite a straight shooting IPA, this one, and I have to say I'm just very curious to see how that transfers into the flavour. So let's have a taste of it then. This one is the Business as Usual, an IPA coming in at 7% ABV, brewed at In Brewing in Gothenburg in collaboration with Stigbergets and In Brewing, also both from Gothenburg. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that's very nice actually. I'm going to say straight away, first impression of this one is that it's either a little bit of a hybrid or it is more of a kind of West Coasty IPA. It's one of these kind of more modern. Yeah, I think I'm going to go for that, to be honest. I would say that this one, I've made a mistake earlier on in the video and said to you it's a New England Hazy, because that's what it was listed as actually when I had a wee look on Untappd. But then the thing was, the one that I saw had the Stigbergets thing in the middle, so maybe there has been a few different versions of this. But yeah, this one definitely is more of a kind of West Coasty type beer, this one, and one of the kind of lower bitterness West Coasters. So yeah, but regardless of what it is, it's very nice, and that should be the main question when you're trying beer, at least in my opinion. But yeah. But yeah, thumbs up to all the breweries involved in this one. I think it goes together very nicely. So there we go. You can see there's one or two little bits of sediment floating around in this one, but nothing really visible on the bottom of the can right enough. So yeah, looks good. Certainly looks good. Let me just line that up for you again. And there we are. So let's break down the flavour of this beer for you a little bit and just see how we go. So yeah, straight away with this beer, middle third of your palate, you can feel that nice, smooth, kind of white bready quality just coming out right across the middle of the tongue there. You will feel a little bit of graininess come out of this beer the further you go into the aftertaste for sure, and then if you move to either end of that middle third of your palate, there is a little bit of that, how would we say, there is a little touch of a more kind of bread crusty element coming out of the beer. So yeah, that goes together really well actually, but it does, there is a wee, as I say, it gets a little touch more grainy the further you go into the aftertaste. Yeah. So yeah, this one, as I say, it gets a thumbs up from me. It is my impression that I had of this beer before was that it was going to be a very kind of straight shooting sort of thing, and that has transpired into the aroma here. So like I say, nice fresh white bready base. There's a little bit of a kind of grainy element underneath, and then you also have as I say, a bit of a bread crust either end of that middle third of your palate. But sitting in the middle, if you go into the dead centre of your palate there is a wee touch of a kind of Werther's Original sort of butter candy type thing, but you do get a little bit of a more kind of concentrated caramel right in the middle of your palate. But as you move further out from that sort of epicentre, if you like, you'll get a few more kind of sort of how would we say, kind of more biscuity, McVitie's Digestive kind of biscuity elements coming out of this one. But yeah, I think that covers the middle third of your palate quite well, to be honest. So yeah. Yeah, middle third of your palate then, as I say, quite nice and straight shooting, and it does get a little bit sweeter the further you go into the aftertaste as well. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a more kind of bready, grainy build up out of it. Then on the back third of your palate, On the back third of your palate, there is a wee bit more of a kind of, you get a little bit of the graininess, but you also get quite a bit of bitiness out of the wheat as well. And it's difficult to see where the kind of border between those two aspects is, to be honest with you, because it does give you a nice wee bit of bite. And that builds a good bridge with the hops, actually, but we'll come to that a little bit later. But yeah, sitting on top of that kind of more wheaty, bitey backbone, you can feel a little bit of the yeasty character in this beer. So when you start from the back of the palate, the flavour's kind of like this high, and then it just condenses down gradually. As you go into the middle third of your palate, it feels a little bit more condensed together. And yeah, I think it really works very, very nicely in that regard. So yeah, I certainly like how the malty side of this beer goes together. Quite different from what we've had from Stigbergets or OO before. But let's focus on the hoppy side of things. Back corners of the palate, there is a little touch of earthiness to this one, and as you move further forward, the earthiness fades away quite quickly, and then as you move further and further forward, it's got a nice big floral aromatic quality to it as well. So yeah, that certainly goes together quite nicely in this beer. I can really appreciate that about this one for sure. And I would say as well, it does build a little bit in bitterness the further that you go into the aftertaste, but again, we'll come back to that a little bit later. I am wondering from the flavour of this one, just because of the spiciness that it has, is there potentially a little bit of Columbus in this one? There's just something familiar about the slight spiciness that this beer has, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of Columbus in this as a bittering hop, and this beer does have a little bit more bitterness to it than the other ones I've had from both Stigbergets and OO in recent times. But nothing wrong with that. I do enjoy a good West Coast IPA. But yeah, I think that covers the green component of the beer quite nicely. The grassy bit around the front curve of your tongue. It's got a little bit of zestiness to it, but not overly much. It's quite a nice bright beer, this. But yeah, front third of your palate then. On the border region between front third and kind of middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a sort of bready build up in there, some nice grainy elements. Then the base of the front third of your palate, again, you get some nice bready and grainy elements underneath there, and then on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters come out of the beer. And yeah, again, I'd be quite curious to know about the hop in this one, because it does display a little bit more pungency than it did in the aroma. But yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of a kind of more pungent grapefruity note. Then as you move further forward, you get some passion fruity notes and, pardon me, a little bit of a mango and a wee touch of apricot underneath. I think this is Citra. I do think it is a bit of Citra that's in this one. And from the flavour, I do wonder, could it be a little bit of Mosaic maybe? Or, no, not Mosaic. I'd said the wrong thing. Motueka. It's Motueka, I think, that could be in this, because it does have a wee bit, as you move into the front of the palate, you can feel the apricot kind of moves forward a little bit, and then you just get a little touch of a kind of limey element. You can feel just behind the kind of front tip of your tongue, there's a slightly more oily, limey element pushes its way out of the beer here. So yeah, this one's got a few really interesting things going on with it, so it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard as well. So yeah, interesting stuff for sure. Yeah, the fruity side of this beer is quite nice, so I do reckon Citra and maybe Motueka or something like that. But yeah, it certainly works quite nice. It's got a little bit of that old school kind of tropically bite to it, and a bit of a citrusy zest as well. So yeah, again, just very straight shooting, but it certainly works, absolutely. So yeah, stronger grapefruit, a little bit of passion fruit, more mango, apricot underneath, and then a wee bit of a kind of limey character. I think that sums up the fruity side of this beer quite nicely. But yeah, let's round off the mouthfeel. Let's round off the review with the mouthfeel section then. Let's look at that. So yeah, overall, I would say that this beer is pretty much, it's potentially right in the middle of the spectrum, but it feels a little bit lighter, maybe to the bottom end of mid-bodied. The carbonation has a bit of smoothness to it, but also a little bit of crispness. And the thing you'll note, I'm noticing that develops in this beer a little bit, if you go towards the back half of that middle third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of dryness in there. So I suspect there could be a little bit of Pilsner malt in here, or maybe a little touch of lager malt, and I think I missed that earlier on. But yeah, as I say, a bit of a crisp carbonation in there, a wee touch of crispness from the Pilsner, from what I suspect is a bit of Pilsner malt in there as well. But yeah, that certainly works very nice in this beer. So yeah, towards the lighter end of mid-bodied, bit of a crisp carbonation. And yeah, nice wee bit of hoppy bitterness to this one. I think this is potentially a 40 or 50 IBU beer, but remember, this is my weakest point of beer reviewing. I do think this one has a little bit more bitterness to it, and it does lean a little bit more towards the West Coasty side of things stylistically. Smooth maltiness, a little bit of a graininess to it, wee touch of sweetness in there, and some nice juicy fruity elements also. So yeah, I like how this beer, I do like how this beer goes about its business actually. Didn't even mean that pun there. There we go. But yeah, it's a solid IPA. This one, as I say, a bit of a kind of leans more towards the kind of West Coasty IPAs, and it's more like a kind of modern take on the West Coast IPA, if we can term it that. So a bit lower in bitterness, and not quite as oily in the malt base. A wee bit more of a kind of bready presence, if you like. So yeah, it has a little bit of that hybrid element to it as well. But yeah, I guess we can leave it at that for this review. This one was called Business as Usual. An IPA coming in at 7% ABV, brewed at In Brewing in Gothenburg in collaboration with Stigbergets and In Brewing, also both from Gothenburg up on the Swedish west coast. So yeah, interested to review this beer. Nice to see these guys collaborating together, but you know, they've got all these connections with the brewers moving around and things like that, so it's not a complete surprise. But yeah, a good beer this one, and it comes across as quite nice and sessionable. This would be a lovely festival beer actually, but at 7%, you know, maybe it's a little bit high in alcohol for a proper session beer, but I think it sort of suits that vibe. It's just a very nice, easy drinking IPA, this one. So yeah, well done to all three breweries involved there. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets and In Brewing. We will return to these guys sometime soon, I'm sure. But in the meantime, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll catch you guys later. The business as usual, IPA, 7% ABV from Stigbergets and In up in Gothenburg. Slange, skull, and cheers.